Hey folks, I'm Dustin Cormier again. This is How to Rock Astrology. We're going to be continuing our reading of the divine forces of the Lunar Nakshatras. This is an introduction of the book. Today in particular, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the author's bibliography and their Radha's breakdown as to the Vedic texts, which are the source for her derivations of the nakshatras. And she gives a little breakdown as to when the nakshatra has its source essence in the Vedas and when it is derived or has further commentary in the Puranic literature and the literature of the Brahmanas and commentaries that came from their essential source essence in the Vedas. So today we're going to talk about a bit of the history of the four Vedas and their associated Brahmanas as pertains to the scriptures given in this book when defining the nakshatras. So that's the material presented in today's video. So Radha begins. She says, the following is a synopsis of the principal Vedic scriptures cited in this book. For convenience, the author has categorized the literary works of India as the following four. Number one is, there's really just two derivations. One is Vedic period scriptures. This includes the Vedas and their auxiliary texts. The second categorization is post-Vedic period literature. This is inclusive of the itihasas, or the epics, the Puranas, or the legends, the Siddhantas, which are more astronomical texts, and finally the Jyotisha Shastra, which are considered to be astrological scriptures, which are not necessarily going to be necessarily as pure as the Vedic literature scriptures, which speak to the nature of the nakshatras. The reason for that is because any literature that is astrological or astronomical even rested in the Siddhantas, unless it makes a clear distinction between Vedic nakshatra mythos and astronomical parashara type astrology, then it might be flawed. The reason for this is you might have heard from our introduction video. There are many people, including this author, although she demarcates her bias, and that's why this author is a strong person for us tropical astrologers to be listening to, as I am a tropical astrologer. Radha, this author, does a good job of trying to show that she derives her essence of the nakshatras from the Vedas. Any shastra or any scripture, any derivation of the nakshatras that comes from astrological scriptures and Jyotisha Shastra could be biased, because those medieval authors who were commentating on Jyotisha Shastra might have used the author's own liberal writing. They might have taken liberties in their own intuition of how the Rashi, or the sign nature of the Rashis in Jyotisha, might have reflected on the essence of the nakshatra. In modern days, we know as I'm a tropical Vedic astrologer, which is now aware of the precession of the equinox, which means that where there was once a marriage of the nakshatras to the Rashis, we know that the Rashis, the position of the sun at the vernal equinox changes in the nakshatra backdrop of the sidereal stars through thousands of years. About every 2,000 years, the position of the vernal equinox, the sun at the vernal equinox, changes every 2,000 years, so that the sun at the start of Aries is in a new nakshatra. And that's the reason for this. We have to be aware of that bias. Now, I say this in every episode, so I'm just going to keep rolling here. The point is that the author does make a strict categorization between the Vedic period scriptures, which is the Vedas and their texts, and the post-Vedic period literature, Puranas, Siddhantas, Itihasas, Jyotisha Shastra, etc. Now, because the Vedas are the earliest available record on India's spiritual past, they assume prominence within the extensive body of Vedic and Hindu literature. The 4 Vedic Samhitas, or Vedas, are the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, and the Atharva Veda. The approximate date of each Veda is a matter of much scholarly debate. Based on the author, Radha, based on her own research, it appears that the earliest of the 4 Vedas, the Rig Veda, was codified somewhere around 4000 to 3000 BC. Importantly, actual cognition and daily application of its vidya, of the Rig Veda's vidya, or its wisdom, this was in place hundreds or possibly thousands of years prior to actual codification. So, while the Rig Veda was codified and written down into scripture about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, the cognosis of the Rig Veda existed and was being orally transmitted way before that. So the remaining Vedas were likely codified after that 3,000 to 4,000 year period before Christ, probably somewhere around 2500 to 1500 BC. The Rig Veda is named as such because each shukta, each hymn, is composed as a rik, a sacred verse recited in praise of a devata. So the Rig Veda is essentially a whole bunch of compositions of verses which are dedicated to the devatas, the forces of nature. There are approximately 1,000 shuktas organized in 10 books or mandalas. These shuktas are cognized by over 400 rishis or seers, but 6 rishis and their families are principal contributors to mandalas 2 through 7. These mandalas are referred to as the family books, each specific to a particular rishi and his gotra or lineage. The rishis of the family books are Girtasamada for mandala 2, Vishvamitra for mandala 3, Vamadeva for mandala 4, and etc. Each of the mandalas or books has a patrilineal author or rishi who channeled it. The remaining mandalas are a compilation of hymns cognized by a large number of sages from various lineages. So it's after number 7. It was started, the contributions were made from various rishis and their lineages. The Shakala recension of the Rig Veda is cited in this book. That's a clarification of a certain understanding of the derivation of the Rig Vedas. There's many people have different derivations. The Shakala recension of the Rig Veda is cited in this book. The Sama Veda consists of hymns from the Rig Veda composed in song, shama format. The Sama Veda's hymns are sourced principally from Rig Veda Mandala 9, a mandala dedicated to the god Soma. Due to its limited scope and its repetition of the Rig Vedic hymns, 95% of the Sama Veda hymns are sourced from the Rig Veda. Due to this limited scope, the Sama Veda is not quoted here. So it's limited and it repeats the Rig Vedic hymns that we are already going to derive a lot from. So the Sama Veda is not quoted in this book. Now, the name Yajurveda is derived from the roots Yaj, which is to sacrifice or worship, and Vid, which is to know. So Yajurveda means the knowledge of sacrificial worship. The Yajurveda covers matters pertinent to the sacrificial ceremonies performed during the Brahmanic era. There are two versions of the Yajurveda. One is the Shukla, or white Yajurveda, and the other is the Krishna, the dark or black Yajurveda. The Vajrayana Madhyandina. The Vajrayana Madhyandina recension of the Shukla Yajurveda is principally cited in this book, as well as the Taittiriya recension of the Krishna Yajurveda. The last of the four Vedas is the Atharva Veda. The primary focus of the Atharva Veda is health and disease. Yet, a diverse range of other topics are also covered, including marriage, ecology, and cosmogony. The Atharva Veda is co-authored by sage Atharvan and sage Angiras, two fire priests of different lineages. Its contents include prayers for health and happiness, as well as spells against disease, enemies, and competitors. The Shaunakya recension is cited in this book. Certain supplementary texts of the Atharva Veda are of great interest to the study of the nakshatras, particularly the Shantikalpa Parishishta. The translation of this text is provided in a special section following section 5, the Vasus of the Vedas. Another auxiliary text of the Atharva Veda is the Kaushika Sutra, a text containing ritual prescriptions as supplements to the hymns of the Atharva Veda. Lastly, the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras places great importance on the ancient Brahmana texts that detail countless rites and rituals of the Vedic yajnas. The Brahmanas include sacrificial commentary, theological discussions, and mystical explanations of these elaborate sacrificial ceremonies. So yeah, the Vedic yajnas are a huge symbolic, they're the deepest symbolic heart transcription of what the nakshatras are really all about. It's very ancient ideas of this Brahmanic sacrifice ritual, which really illuminates the bones of the nakshatras. The nakshatras come from this psychedelically anticipated, translated Vedic sacrifice, the word of which is the yajnas, the Vedic yajnas. And that's why those Brahmana texts are important, because by commentating on the ancient the Vedic yajna sacrifice ceremony, it also thereby commentates on the nature of the nakshatras, which take their places in that ceremony. Each Veda has at least one supporting Brahmana text. The Aitareya Brahmana of the Rig Veda, the Taittiriya Brahmana of the Krishna Yajurveda, which is very important for our purposes, and the Shatapatha Brahmana of the Shukla Yajurveda are extensively quoted in this book in particular. Critically, the Taittiriya Brahmana includes two important sections specific to the nakshatras and their ruling devatas. In 1954, Paul-Émile Dumont published an English translation of the Taittiriya Brahmana, Chapter 3, section 1, verse 1 through 6, in the Proceedings of the American Philosophical Society. It is titled Ishtis to the Nakshatras, or Oblations to the Lunar Mansions, in the Taittiriya Brahmana. The American Philosophical Society has granted permission for the author, Radha, to include Dumont's English translation of this text. His article is found in the section following section 3, the Adityas and the mother Aditi in the Vedas. It is well referenced throughout individual devata chapters when we get to the descriptions of the individual nakshatras and their deities. This Taittiriya Brahmana becomes very important to us because authors such as Ernst Wilhelm and Vic Dicara greatly derive their understanding and their conception of the nakshatras from this very important text, the Taittiriya Brahmana. Finally, included as critical notes to Taittiriya Brahmana, chapter 1, section 5, verse 1, is valuable commentary by translator Bhattabhakshara, an expert on this Brahmana. Bhattabhakshara provides through thought-provoking explanations on the foundation above and below, and the Shakti of each lunar nakshatra. You're going to hear more about that when we get to the Taittiriya Brahmana. This highly esoteric piece is only available in Sanskrit, although, as we know, authors like Vic Dicara and Ernst Wilhelm are doing their best to translate these as above and so as below Taittiriya Brahmana scriptures. Vladimir Yatsenko has very graciously and meticulously translated Bhattabhakshara's commentary. This translated scripture can be found following section 4, the Rudra and the Rudras in the Vedas. And I might very well include that derivation and commentary in my videos where I go through the Taittiriya Brahmana commentary, or scriptures line for line, which we're going to do eventually. So that was the author's little personally derived bibliography of her work. It's very useful for those trying to get a sense of the Vedic bones being presented in this text. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Stay tuned. In the next episode, we're going to have a little reading on how Radha interprets the results of the lunar nakshatras. So stay tuned for that, folks. I hope you enjoy. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. If you're enjoying this series, feel free to like and subscribe because I've always got I got a few more videos coming out in this nakshatra introduction series. Thanks for watching, folks. See you on the next one.